As we wrap up the 100th with episode 199 of the Campus Comics Cast, we hope that Sony follows our leads and wraps up the SonyVerse after having seen Kraven last week. This is Scott Reed, and I'm joined on this episode by
Mike Atchison
and Chad Schubert.
And we're going to be talking about the first 5 appearances of John Stewart. No, not that John Stewart, the other John Stewart, Green Lantern. All right, then we're going to cover some what we've been reading, along with some trivia and CLZ Shake. So does anybody got anything they want to throw out there before we jump into the first 5 John Stewart Green Lantern?
Well, as you're talking about the Sony universe of things, have they made any official announcements, or is it just hopeful news that they will kill it?
Well, I saw, and this is, you see those articles, clickbait articles on Facebook and such, and I did see that Sony was considering selling back Spider-Man to Marvel.
Okay.
But that was, who knows, that was
right.
Just a clickbait article. There's no telling there. Now, I mock the SonyVerse, but the Into the Spider-Verse animated series have been really, really good, and I'm anxious to see the third one. But the other ones, Kraven, Madam Web, Morbius, even Venom, those were mediocre at best. So
yeah,
not comic book
related official.
There's no movies on the docket, are there? Like that was the last one that was in the release kind of schedule.
If you don't count the second Into the Spider-Verse,
okay, the third one,
SonyVerse, then to my knowledge, yeah. Well, I'm sorry, Mike. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say that I haven't seen many movies recently, but we rewatched Gladiator Friday night, and then we went and seen Gladiator 2 Sunday at the theater, and it was a good sequel. I'll say that.
Okay.
It didn't meet the original standard, but that was an Oscar-winning movie, so
right.
Gladiator 2 is pretty darn good.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, I'll just say that out of all the movies that I've seen in the last 4 months, the only one that I would even remotely recommend to anybody is War of the Rohirrim. So that was actually pretty good. Though it does feel a little bit like The Two Towers again, but it's other than that, it's really, really solid. So.
Nice.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about John Stewart Green Lantern, because this is a comic book podcast,
That's
right?
right.
All right. So, Mike, I'm going to give you a little bit of time here. So would you like to tell us when you were first introduced to John Stewart Green Lantern?
Well, because memory is a fickle thing, and at one moment I think I know, and then the next I have second thoughts. But I want to say that my introduction was it was at one of the books in the first 5. I can tell you that it was either Justice League of America number 110. But that would have been as a back issue and not off the shelves, because that was out in 1974. I wasn't buying whenever I was 8 years old, I'm pretty sure. Or Green Lantern number 94. If the scales had to be tipped, I'd say Green Lantern number 94, because that was in 97, and that was right in my heyday of getting comics from my uncle from Sparta Printing. And I remember that 2-issue story, 94 and 95, very clearly, reading and rereading those comics. And when I got them out this week to look at them again, I'm like, you can tell that I've read these things many times.
All right. Well, Shad, what about you? I think I have a guess of what you're going to say. But
see what your guess is.
I want to hear you say it. Oh, so my guess is going to be one of the Justice League animated series.
Absolutely, yeah. It was the Justice League, the original Justice League animated series was the first place. And I mean, when I think of John Stewart, it's absolutely that animated version of him. I don't even know if I have really read any John Stewart comic books until this one. It's always been that cartoon in my head.
So for me, I don't know exactly which issue it is, but I think I was my first, seeing John Stewart was in like Green Lantern, like 182, 183, 184 time frame. So I guess this is like one of the times that Hal Jordan quits being the Green Lantern. I'm just kind of looking at some of the covers
Mm-hmm.
through there, and then John Stewart takes over. And I don't remember how long after this we get that Green Lantern Mosaic limited series that was also focused on John Stewart. But I'm gonna guess that my first reading John Stewart was probably here, issues 182, 183 of the Green Lantern proper title. Probably just something not when it was on the shelf. I'm sure I got this in a bag of back issues, someplace from a swap shop or something like that. I wasn't buying Green Lantern at that time. It's not a title that I bought a lot of, unless it would just happen to come in collections. So,
Yeah, John Stewart headlined the Green Lantern book from issues 182 to 197.
Okay.
And I don't know, that was in the 80s.
Yeah,
Square in
84
the
to
80s, and
86, I think.
yeah. And I want to say Mosaic probably came out in 90, 91 maybe. So, yeah, I think your memory is right in that, because that is whenever he was on the book, and that's where he came to prominence, I think, at least in comics.
right. Yeah, I was surprised how, we kind of had this discussion when we talked about Wonder Man, how far apart those appearances
Yeah.
spread out. And that's the case here with John Stewart. I mean, those 5 appearances are what? It's like 8 years or something like that, 8 or 9 years. I had it written down someplace.
I've got
But,
it here if you'd like me to tick it off for the
well,
listeners.
I mean,
How
yeah,
do you
just
want?
verify. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be covering Green Lantern Volume 2, number 87 for the first appearance. And then the next, that was in 71/72. And then JLA number 110 in 1974. Green Lantern 94 in 77, 95 in 77. And then Tales of the Green Lantern Corps number 3 from 1981.
Okay, so 71 to 81, it's
Yeah.
right around 10 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Pretty good stretch. And
Yeah.
and it wasn't. I mean, we'll be talking about. I've got some notes about what his appearance was like in most of those, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
So let's say some of them were not significant appearances. That is for
he was
certain.
a story
So,
device in a lot of them. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. So, Mike, back to you. What are your thoughts on this version of? I keep feeling like I have to say John Stewart Green Lantern. I don't know. I guess I should just say John Stewart. What are your thoughts on this version of John Stewart as a character?
Well, I would like to give a little bit of history of his conception, because
Okay.
I went into a rabbit hole doing the research here, and the idea of a black Green Lantern was conceived of by the artist Neil Adams, and he based John Stewart, at least his design or his look, on the actor Sidney Poitier. No, Denny O'Neil was the writer, so he's like co-creator, but it was Adams that was that was really pushing that we need to have not just a backup GL, because that makes sense, but we need to be somebody other than a standard white guy. So, this being in 1971, it was not the cutting edge of some diversity in comics, but fairly early on. And there's a whole history there, because it wasn't that many issues prior that Guy Gardner was identified as the
Alternate.
the alternate, but things happened that we'll see in this first issue that we cover, that caused for that kind of prompted the need for another alternate, and it being John Stewart. So now, my initial thoughts, I mean, I think that I remember even at the time when I was a kid reading these, that it was a great idea that you had like a bench, that you had like backups for an organization like the Green Lanterns, because that's how you have to look at the Green Lantern Corps, is they are an intergalactic police force. And to be honest, John Stewart, good or bad personality, he definitely had more personality than Hal Jordan for a lot of years. Some of it was ham-fisted, but it was personality, and that was something that was, I think, fairly well needed. Now, I was also I went to Mike's Amazing World, and there were 101 appearances. He had 101 appearances between 71 and 91. That's all that's listed on Mike's Amazing World of Comics. So he did. It's like it was a slow ramp up, but once he got his footing, it was he had quite a few, and most of those appearances were in Green Lantern, and he was the headliner. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I think it was probably he's probably, if you were to average out all the generations, all the comics readers and TV watchers, I think he would be the most well-known Green Lantern now, because you factor in the younger generation and all the animated series. I That's just a complete conjecture. I have no idea if that's fact. We're not doing a poll, but
No.
you can't really. I mean, Guy Gardner, yeah, he's up there too for a lot of comic readers. But anyway, but to me though, I really, as much as I like Kyle Rayner in the '90s, it didn't make sense that John didn't take over the mantle as Green Lantern, unless there was something in the books itself that prevented that. Maybe there was something going on after Hal Jordan's breakdown and him turning into Parallax. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I was just gonna say at that point they really didn't have the idea of, there wasn't just one Green Lantern for the sector, so they just had all the Green Lanterns that they wanted to at that point when Kyle Rayner kind of took over. But I didn't read a lot of Kyle Rayner.
Well, even the Green Lantern core series that sort of took over the title of Green Lantern, their headquarters was on Earth. That's with Kilowog and Aricia and Katmatui and all of them. So it was, of course, I don't remember the Guardians, and the main power battery they've died and been destroyed multiple times. So I don't remember what caused the core series that, when Joe Staton was doing all the art. I forget, Englehart might have been the writer, but I don't remember why they were based on Earth, but they were.
All right, Chad, what are your thoughts on this version of the character?
I really didn't have a lot to go off of going in, but I liked that especially for the time, that they were giving a black man a very educated job, and it wasn't this blaxploitation kind of thing, which I really appreciated and was like, okay, good, we're a little bit ahead of that. John Stewart's an architect. I mean, there were a couple of things where I was like, well, that's a little bit pigeonholy, but it could have been way worse, let's just say, for the 70s in comic books. But I liked him immediately, and like Mike said, like, there are a lot of people who think of John Stewart as their Green Lantern, and I'm one of those people that is who I think of first when I think of Green Lantern. And so it was really neat to see the beginning parts of Green Lantern in the John Stewart Green Lantern.
Well, my initial thoughts on this character is, you can tell that you got a bunch of white guys writing
Yes.
black characters.
Right.
I mean, it's just like, it's always like when you read the first appearances of or early appearances of the Falcon.
Oh yeah.
It's they have to have the angry black man, and
Yes.
I feel like that's what we got here with this introduction.
Yeah, and at least
John
in the first
Stewart.
issue. Yeah, Green
Yes.
Lantern 87, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Could've
he
been
doesn't
way
have a
worse,
whole lot
but-
of stuff later on.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
And the fact he calls himself Black Lantern at one point
Yes.
in Green Lantern 87 as well. So I am so happy that this character, the writing for this character, not so much the character, but the writing for the character has matured and
Yeah.
come along so much since the writing that we got in these first 5 appearances.
We're a group that likes trivia, and I don't really know if this is really a trivia question, but I want to ask you guys if you know if you can think of some of the first black superheroes in comics and where they are in their order of appearance.
Ooh. Well, now I know that John Stewart is supposed to be DC's third.
Yes, I've heard that. I can only really prove the second, but I think I know where we're getting the third from.
Okay. So, and then now, are you talking DC and Marvel,
Yeah.
or just?
Yep.
Okay. Whew. So you want to put us on the spot here? Is that what you're
I
wanting to do?
just because I got the answer, so
Oh.
it's easy.
Oh, okay.
I looked it up.
Okay. I'm not going to go back Golden Age.
No, yeah,
So,
we're talking
okay.
more.
So I'm gonna start with Black Panther. For
That's
Marvel
correct.
as the first.
1966.
Okay. So then, if John Stewart, then I'm trying to remember where he falls in with the Falcon, because I think Falcon is post
Nope.
John Stewart.
He's the second.
Is he the second?
1969.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so he's 69. So I was thinking he was also like 70. I thought he was like 72 or something like that.
Okay.
All right. So then now I know there's a DC, but see, there should be two DC heroes in there someplace. And just like off the top of my head, what Black Lightning? Is Black Lightning pre John Stewart?
No, he's way down. He's down
Way
the list
down?
in 1997.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
Or 1977, sorry.
Oh, 19,
Okay.
77. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
He's a fourth world character, so I'll give you that. The third.
Oh, so Black Racer?
Yep, that's the third.
Okay, so-
and that he only predated John Stewart by like 3 or 4 months.
Okay. Okay. So, all right. Is there who else is on the list?
Well, I'll just go from here. You got
Yes.
okay. So the other person that I'm assuming that they're counting is the a black character before John Stewart was not really a superhero, but he was a pretty prominent character in Easy Company in Our Army at War, and that's Jackie Johnson. And he appeared in 1961. So he wasn't a superhero, but he was in comics
main
and Silver
character
Age,
kind
and yeah.
Okay.
So then, after John,
I would have never guessed that one.
yeah, it's so after John Stewart, you got Luke Cage in 1972,
Okay.
and he's also the first to have his own title.
Okay.
And then you got Nubia in Wonder Woman,
Wonder Woman
204.
204.
Black Goliath, which
Okay.
was in Luke Cage in 75. Then you got Storm, the first female black superhero,
Okay.
of course, in John
Well-
Size X-Men.
Well, Nubia. You just said Nubia was before Storm.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that my notes, I wrote that
Probably
before I put
Marvel.
Nubia in there because Nubia wasn't a superhero at the time. Now she kind of is.
Now
so,
she is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's true. You got me there. Then you got Tyrock. Nobody knows who Tyrock is, but he was the Legionnaire that had the crazy voice powers in 1976. And then you get into Mal Duncan, who had a variety of superhero titles like the Guardian, Hornblower, the Herald. He was in Teen Titans in 76. And then Black Lightning in 77. He was the first DC character to have his own series.
Okay.
Then you got Bumblebee a couple months later. And then you get into Cyborg in 1980 with the new Teen Titans. And Vixen in Action Comics in 1981.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought it was kind of interesting just to have them all listed out. But
So, character origin. So basically, we are getting the origin of John Stewart as far as his relationship to being a Green Lantern in episode issue 87. So I mean, what do you think about the origin?
Anticlimactic.
well, it's like you said, it's you can tell it's not written. It's not written realistically. It was very stereotypical. The design, despite Adam's artwork, his design and then O'Neill's dialogue was cringeworthy. I mean, even though he kind of he was like had that sort of angry black man persona, he did though sort of try to he showed some glimmer of just being a righteous person, and I think in that first issue in 87 it was identified that he was an architect. So but I don't think the setting was great, and there was some weird stuff about that origin story that I mean, just the idea that the whole contrivance of the shooting of that senator running for the president, I could not figure out. And before I go into what I'm going to say, do you guys agree? Do you know what I'm talking about there?
Well, I mean, the whole issue itself is, I mean, just the setup. They had just done this with the alternate Green Lantern. What was it? Issue 60?
Ooh.
Oh, the Guy Gardner episode.
Yeah, it was like
episode
68 or something, maybe.
Yeah. So before they can even introduce John Stewart, they have to we've got to get Guy Gardner out of the picture for a little bit. So how can we do that? So they stage this bus accident.
He gets hit by a bus trying to save a girl.
Yeah. save a girl. So we still have. So then the Guardians call. It's like, hey, we need a new backup. So here's the guy we're sending you. So that's kind of like the premise to the whole, the whole thing. This is part of that Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams social conscious. Era of the Green Lantern. So here they're trying to, kind of. You're right. It's pretty contrived. That's just. I don't really know what else to say about it other than that. So they pay a black guy to try to shoot, but the real assassination is going to be outside, and it's just so messy.
Yeah, I mean the black guy that senator apparently paid, because it doesn't say outright. You just have to assume that he was paid to shoot blanks to make the senator look like a martyr and ascend to the presidency, and also make it look like African American people are on a rampage and they're violent and stuff like that. But then the white guy with the machine gun or the rifle or whatever trying to shoot a cop with real bullets, it didn't make sense. What was the cop a target for?
Well, the cop was the target just because he was outside of the venue where he was speaking at, because they were going to try to kill this guy.
Yeah.
And I guess the cop was going to be killed just so that way they could then kill the presidential candidate whenever he comes out.
Okay.
It's like he was still going to be dead. So I don't see how he was going to become president. It was just so messed up. Yeah.
Yes.
It's confusing when you stop and think about it.
Yeah, I try. That's why I wrote it down. And I'm like, I'm not going to think about it anymore. But yeah. I mean, Chad, I always like hearing your opinion on some of these older books and the stories, whether it's Golden Age, Silver Age, whatever.
Yeah, I didn't think that the senator or whatever was the one that had staged it, but I definitely got where it was staged and what they were trying to do with it. And you're right, it did seem like a social commentary, very much trying to kind of bring it up. But I didn't trip on it too bad. I just kind of was like, all right, this is a book in the 70s, and I usually, if I'm honest, I kind of just check out a little bit sometimes on them, because they don't have a lot of weight to them sometimes. I think the weirdest part of this and most of every one of these books is the way that they end. And I'm like, you're telling me John Stewart doesn't show up in the next issue at all whatsoever? Like these, like the way that 87 ends, the way that 95 ends, the way that it's just like you're just telling me that he's in the last panel of this book, but he's never going to show up again for another 2 years. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. So 87 was more like, okay, this is just your inauguration, your training, and it's just an introduction to the character. But he doesn't even get his own ring. I mean, he's basically
he's just borrowing Hal's.
There is, he's like, Hal has to. So there is no, and we'll see that in the next issue, that JLA issue.
Well, that kind of what threw me in this. It's like so these Green Lanterns, when they're training somebody, they can just give them their powers without them having their own ring. Yeah. It's like, why don't you do that all the time?
Yeah, I'm going to give all my family. We're going to be a family of
That's right.
Green Lanterns.
Hey, Flash, you can't go into outer space. Let me just give you my powers. You can have a green bubble. You can go in outer space now with me. We can hang out together. It's just like It's that whole era where they just randomly give these heroes abilities that are really outside of the scope. They don't think about it. It's like, how can we tell this story? Oh, let's give them this power or this ability.
It's the Haneification of some of these stories. Bob Haney was notorious about not caring about what made sense, and he just told a story.
That was like one of the biggest things for me. It was just like, out of all the things that don't make sense, that made like the least sense to me.
Well, and the other thing, the one thing I tripped on probably more than anything was that Neil Adams didn't try at all to have a different looking black man as the character for the attempted assassin versus John Stewart.
Yeah.
Like one is just in street clothes and the other one is in the Green Lantern outfit. And I was like, come on, you could have given me anything different.
Hey, the assassin has mutton chops.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
And I would say he has a slightly more receding hairline.
You're right. His hairline is slightly more receding.
now, my first time reading Green Lantern 87, I never had a copy of this until recent years, but when they had the Green Lantern Green Arrow reprints on that Baxter paper, I read that came out in the 80s. I bought those, and that's where I was like, wow, this is some great Neil Adams art. Stories didn't always make sense, but the art was
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anything that you feel that they have forgotten about this character's origin, changed, or retconned for his use now? I mean, anything different or?
Well, I never know which order to go here, but I'm going to go.
Go for it.
It doesn't matter.
So his origin's basically not really been contradicted over the years or retcon. I think it's just been enhanced because he eventually became known. They knew he had a background as a Marine, which led to his role in the Green Lantern Corps as a team leader, a field leader. He's got those organizational skills, not just an architect. And they also, the way, in later years, and I'm talking like early in the 2000s, they started showing how all the Green Lanterns would use their rings differently. So Kyle Rayner was an artist, so he was a bit more intricate or artistic with his, or whatever, or had a flourish, I guess you'd say. But John Stewart he showed his architectural skills and his knowledge of weapons and things like that with his constructs. So that's the only thing I can say is changed, other than maybe a uniform change, maybe a hairstyle, maybe just got a goatee now, maybe doesn't, whatever. But for the most part, no, it's pretty consistent. Yeah.
The
He's had
job.
a rough.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say he had a rough. We'll talk about it later, but he had some rough stuff happen to him over the years. But go ahead, Chad.
I was gonna say the one thing I kind of knew differently was, like you had said, his occupation, and whether or not that was like a retcon or just added to that he was an architect and a veteran was kind of the only add-on. And I guess later on he's like one of the only Lanterns who doesn't have a ring ever. I guess he is, his body is his ring, and the heart is the battery, according to Wikipedia. On that, like,
that's current stuff. Yeah.
So they end up changing it to where he doesn't have a ring at all, which is the only other thing I kind of knew or could find in research.
Yeah. That's in some of the Philip Kennedy Johnson in the John Stewart War Journal, I think it's called.
Oh, okay.
It was its own
fairly
like 12-ish.
recent.
Yeah, I think that was coming out in there. I haven't finished all that, but I think that's where that might have been established.
Gotcha.
Okay, this is a little sidebar here. So, and this is really probably more for you, Mike. So, how in the world, up prior to this point, is Guy Gardner the only person on planet Earth worthy of being a Green Lantern?
It's also based on proximity.
Okay.
And, I mean, it's not like this is not the world according to Mike, DC Comics according to Mike. This is just my headcanon or how I look at it. You know, the reason Guy Gardner wasn't the primary Green Lantern is because he was a little bit farther away than Hal Jordan. So they both met the qualifications of being fearless, and which evolved into not just really being fearless, but can overcome fear.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think there's plenty of other people in the world that are, and by say how close they were, that I'm saying, I mean close to Abin Sur, and where he was dying after wrecking a spaceship, which I always wondered as have many people. Why, if he was a Green
Why he
Lantern,
was in a
why was he in a
spaceship,
spaceship? Yeah. But
Okay, so to follow up, I'll have a follow up to that here in just a second. But why did something happen in Guy Gardner's history where he turned into this self-absorbed
yeah,
person? Or I mean, was there an event that caused that, or was just they just started writing him differently?
it was called Keith Giffen
Okay,
and
all
J.M.D.
right.
DeMatteis. Yeah, they
Okay,
just changed his persona, his personality.
okay. So that
And
just all started with
yeah,
Justice League, that
Justice League
series.
One, the
Okay, because
Brawhaha
that's
League. Yeah.
really, yeah, that's whenever I started becoming aware of Guy Gardner was during that series.
Yeah, he
And
was not even. I mean, if you look at this Green Lantern '87, he was pretty decent guy. I mean, he was plenty decent.
yeah,
He was
yeah,
trying to save a little girl. He wasn't arrogant and
girls.
yeah,
He was a PE coach. He's taking them on a field trip. He's doing all this stuff.
yeah.
So, okay. So going back to the question about the first question is, and you kind of talked about this. The Rings pick their successors, not the Guardians, and that just seems so uncharacteristic or wrong whenever I was reading this issue. It's like the Guardians say, "Oh, Guy Gardner's hurt. We
Yeah.
need a new backup." It's like there wasn't a backup for Abin Sur. It just happened whenever he died. You
Yeah.
know, so the same thing should happen for Hal Jordan. If he dies, a new Green Lantern takes the place. But
Yeah, that
um,
should have been the way. I mean, that's like you said. That was in the origin. That's the way it worked, and it's basically the rings are pre-programmed to search out a replacement if the primary holder is dead or incapacitated. Yeah,
so that was just like it was just wrong, for me.
just
It
yeah, it
just,
was.
it just
I think
went
it was just
wrong.
poor writing, really. I mean, they should have paid attention a little bit more to that's the way it typically would happen. And now I wish there would have been a story that showed exactly how John got his own ring, because eventually he does have his own ring in some of these stories.
Yeah,
He doesn't have to like wait for Hal's
yeah.
ring to
Wait for
fly
Hal
to
to
him. Yeah,
charge him up.
yeah. Wait for Hal to slip on a bar of soap or something. Yeah,
Well, he got the ring in 110, right? Briefly,
yeah. So
because
he
it
was.
went to him. Yeah.
Yeah. So when he was training as a Green Lantern in '87. I don't know if he had his own ring. I guess at the time, temporarily. I don't really know.
I just take that as that's where I was making that comment about Hal Jordan just sharing his
Yeah.
abilities with him.
Right.
I didn't really feel like he ever gave him a ring.
Right.
So
But then it was in Justice League number 110, and Hal slips on the bar of soap,
so yeah.
which is redonkulous and great at the
Yes.
same time. And the ring goes, "Oh, I am programmed to go find John Stewart." And he goes and finds John Stewart, and John Stewart was much more congenial. He was like, "All right, I guess I'll be there. I'll do this." And yeah.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second, because at that point, the ring can control John Stewart. John Stewart's not controlling the ring in that issue, because the ring takes him where he's supposed to go. He doesn't go where he's supposed to go. The ring
I
forces
guess
him
it
to
kind
go.
of guides him there. Or, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That was just another thing that was just for purposes of telling the story they wanted. That let's just make the ring go there.
Well, that's our question number 4 about what the powers are about. That's some of my notes. Is that it's with power rings, they've expanded and contracted so many times over the years what they are capable of.
yeah. So what else do you want to add about the power set here, Mike?
Uh, well, like I said, they kind of have changed over the years. I think I mentioned already about with John Stewart's use of the ring, he had more his constructs tended to be more intricate and more militaristic in design. Like a weapon, and later on at least yeah, I mean, the powers are the powers for a Green Lantern, and it's based on will, and at least the Green Lantern, of course, all the other, the Red Lanterns, the Yellow Lanterns, they're all based on a different emotion or whatever in the spectrum, but it's willpower with the Green Lanterns, and I think it's stayed pretty much the same, but it's just the extent of what it can do, whether it can be, it can translate, whether it can keep its holder or its wearer alive without him being conscious. I've seen stories where the Green Lantern is incapacitated in space, but the ring acts as like a life support system. So yeah, it's almost magical sometimes. And it's when you look at the Golden Age Green Lantern, Alan Scott, it was an actual magic green ring. Yeah, but yeah, otherwise it's green energy, and it does the trick.
Chad, you want to add anything to that about power set or?
No, not with. I mean, with the limited knowledge I have of Green Lanterns, it just seemed as though, like Mike had said, the ring kind of has powers, and whoever has it just kind of does their thing with it. So I didn't really feel like he had a certain power set that was super different than any other lantern that we'd seen before or after.
All right, so what do we want to say about how this version of John Stewart compares to the modern version of John Stewart? We've hinted on a few things, but anything additional? Actually, Shad, anything you would like to add about John Stewart?
Nothing that
different now than he was.
I think it's just more flushed out. It's a little bit more. He's not a caricature of a black man in the 70s anymore. He's more of a flushed out, full character that has his own ups, downs, and shape and look that isn't just looks like also the guy that's shooting the senator. And and so I think that's really all that I kind of see different is just more time with the character, more than the 100 issues over 30 years kind of thing, or 20 years.
Right. Mike, same question.
Well, I think it's not so much the contrast or comparison between then and now as much as the road that he's traveled, in my opinion, because certain writers have put him through the paces when it comes to just challenges in his life. Everything from, he got married to Katmatui whenever he was in the Green Lantern book. Katmatui died in the oh boy, not Matt, was Mike Mignola did the art. Did he do the writing too? Who did Cosmic Odyssey?
I don't remember.
Maybe Matt Wagner? I should know this, but it was in Cosmic Odyssey that, boy, I hope I'm right here.
Cosmic Odyssey's Jim Starlin with Mike Mignola.
There you go. Okay. But I believe that's where he inadvertently caused the destruction of an entire planet called like Xansi or something like that, and it really messed him up. And it really carried over into Mosaic and some of the, some of his future stories. But it was he went through a lot, and it took a long time for him to get some redemption for that. Even though it was more of his He was a little bit too bold in some things that he did that caused for that destruction. But later on, he led the Lantern Corps because he had the leadership skills that that he pulled from his experience in the military, in the Marines. So I see he had quite the evolution. It hasn't been really back and forth as much as a continuous progression.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about some of our favorite or least favorite moments from these 5 issues. Chad, you go first. What do you want to call out? Anything from these 5 issues?
Man, I mean, I think that just looking at specifically like issue 70 or 94, when just like anybody, he reminds me of when you say, okay, and like a job, when I'm thinking about like my job, when you go, okay, we're going to cross-train people in case somebody gets sick and whatnot, and you show them how to do the job once, and then you don't probably talk about it again for like, in this case, 2 years. And then all of a sudden you show up and it's like, okay, you're going to have to save Hal. You're going to have to take him to wherever and do this. And he just gets thrown in the mix of things because and unless there's these behind-the-scenes stories, which there doesn't seem to be any indication that he's working it on a regular basis and getting called to action. These are the stories that of his life, is that he just kind of gets to get plugged in and react. And for the way that they write him, he does a decent job of keeping his cool in the midst of all that, but is kind of just lost in it. Yeah, he's somehow knows that he needs to go travel through space and is completely comfortable with that as an Earth human. Like, you're just going to put on a suit and you're going to wear this ring and you're going to travel to a whole nother planet. And he's just like, okay, let's go for it. So his calmness and his ability to just do things is pretty impressive for as little amount of action as he seems to get in there. That kind of was my biggest thing, is he's underused in these first 5 issues and still manages to maintain a calmness when he's faced with a giant world that existed that he had no idea of before that.
Yeah, 94, 95, his job is a taxi service.
Yes.
He's a taxi service for those 2 issues.
Yes.
Yeah, and but here's the thing. We saw in JLA 110 that the ring can just take him wherever they need to go.
That's true, yeah.
Without whether they want to or not. So why didn't Hal Jordan's ring just take him
Right.
where he needed to go?
Well, I get a kick out of 110, which, by the way, that's one of my favorite Justice League stories and one of my favorite Christmas stories. The story was about
Mike, that book was so bad.
But that was Bronze Age writing, and I granted that it was bad, but that's why I loved it. I mean, in so many ways. I mean, the Key as the villain, one of the most ridiculous designs of a villain, his key men, the idea that, I mean, there was other reasons. I mean, that this issue, I liked having, anytime Phantom Stranger shows up to save the day, I like it. You could tell Len Wein favored some characters. He put Elongated Man and Phantom Stranger in a lot of his stories, which are 2 of my favorite characters. So, yeah.
That story was just so weak because it just, Phantom Stranger is this Deus Ex Machina character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know that he's around. They go through they're all vanishing
one at a
or
time. They
dying
all
or
die.
whatever, one at
Look
a
like
time.
yes.
And then
Yep.
out of the nether regions comes the Phantom Stranger who saves the day, but there was no clue of him being there prior
No.
to it. That was just such a terribly contrived story.
It was. It has to be nostalgia, because I agree that on
Yes.
the technical aspects that it's not a great story, but I must have liked. Okay. So one of the things I really liked was that, when I love the way in the Justice League they send out the signal to the JLAers to respond, and you got a panel for each of the ones that why they can't respond and why they can. You got Aquaman and Mara are busy because they got a lights festival because it's around Christmas, and you got all these different. It's just my weakness, man. The Justice League stuff like that. I mean, yeah. So, yeah,
Mike, I'll
things
back
don't
you
really
up. This
make
was my
sense.
favorite of the 5 too. So
Oh gosh.
But I loved how Red Tornado disses Green Arrow. Red Tornado he's an android, and Green Arrow's trying to, Red Tornado. So what's so special about Christmas Eve? And Red Tornado's like, what do you mean? And Red Tornado's like, well, if you just don't have the ability to explain it, then just say so. And that just ticked off Green Arrow. I thought that was great. Another reason is that it was, St. Louis, Missouri, which is close to us, was the setting, and the arch was there, and yeah. And you're right about John being just a transportation. He was because every time he tried to use the ring as a weapon, he got stymied by the color yellow.
Yellow.
Yeah.
Yellow.
Yeah.
It's always yellow.
And it was like, what the heck? He could have at least, like, when that gas was coming out of that, whatever you call the thing that makes music, and it was putting out the poisonous gas, he said he couldn't use it because the machine was yellow, but he could have just put a dome or a bubble around him and his teammates and protected him. I don't know. There's, a lot of nonsensical stuff, but again. And then you had Red Tornado's, he got for a Christmas present, he got his new outfit, which
New
was
costume, yeah.
better than the old one, but I never did like the yellow jester stripes, so for his pants.
Well, we've mentioned this before when we were reading some other Green Lantern story. I don't remember, but issue 94, we go back to Pie Face.
Yes. It wasn't until the last of the 5 issues that he was no longer called that. Carol called him Tom, which is his real name, Tom Kamaku, or Kamaku. I don't know how you pronounce it, but she quit calling him Pie Face by then, which was in 81. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good that they finally stopped that.
Did
Chad, you got any other
yes
parts you want to talk about?
kind of, maybe. I mean, it's really more of a question than anything. So I had to find some of the 94, 95 from an unknown source, and
Me too.
did 95 just kind of, it seemed like it didn't have a real nice, well, maybe it did. Maybe I'm getting something mixed up. Never mind. I take it back. I thought, and maybe my file was messed up and now it's just fine, because I think when I was originally reading 95, it abruptly ended and there wasn't even like the letters pages at the end of it, and I was like, is this, did I have did I have a bad file, or did something happen to where just it was done? But it's there now, so I don't think that I actually finished 95, to be honest with you. I don't think I missed much, though.
The good guys won, just to spoil it for you. Yeah. Well,
I don't think I have any other. I was looking through my notes here, and I don't really have anything major to talk about. I mean, so Mike, what else I know you said you felt like you had a lot of notes, so what else you want to talk about?
I'll just comment on 94 and 95 because, like I said, either before we started recording or right at the beginning, these issues I know I had physically back then. The ones I have now are the ones I had then. They're read to death, and as soon as I started rereading them, I was like, I know what happens next. I know every scene in this comic. It was the Mike Grell era of the Green Lantern title, which that's, to me, the artist for Green Lantern and Green Arrow. Those covers, though, I remember, seeing Green Arrow, even by then I knew Green Arrow had to have his goatee as beard, but he had a shaved beard, and man, they played that up on the cover. Why does Green Arrow, what does it say here? Green Arrow without a beard? Why?
Yeah.
And then you got Black Canary is strapped to some gears that look like they're going to rip her apart, and I remember being 11 years old, freaking out, going, oh my God, that would hurt if those gears turn on, if he presses that button. This has just visceral feelings. I could just seeing these books. That's why I'm so glad we did this, because it let me get these books back out. So, yes, you have some, even in these, you got some of the late 70s Bronze Age stuff, It's
I'm just glad to know that Green Arrow carries a shaving kit around.
Yeah, he shaves. That's one of my notes. Shaving with an arrowhead would be tough. You would expect to see him nicked all the heck up. It's just great. And it's also, I noted, this is the second story in our 5 that involves an assassination attempt.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And if I didn't know better, Colonel Crisp is the mascot for some cereal or potato chips.
I also thought that he went through all the trouble of shaving so that he wouldn't be recognized, and was immediately recognized once he got inside the compound.
Yeah.
So that did him a lot of good.
Yeah. And I asked you before if you've read any of the recent Wonder Woman stories that with Tom King. Mm-hmm. Have you read any of them?
Not since that one issue, the Superman Wonder Woman issue. I haven't gotten back to it yet.
But you're familiar with the main villain, the Sovereign.
Yes.
So that's who this villain in here, Colonel Crisp, reminds me of. Kind of an older
okay.
guy that's trying to control the president. I thought, man, I just wonder if Tom King read this book and kind of got that idea. Yeah. That's all I had. That last issue is the Tales of the Green Lantern Corps. That was, a lot of people relate Tales of the Green Lantern Corps to the later Alan Moore written ones. But this one was by Len Wein, this whole miniseries. And it was pretty good. It was a pretty good story. Had Krona as the main villain, but nothing really spectacular. And, to be honest, John Stewart was just a cameo in it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He was just basically to say that he felt something but wasn't going to do anything about it. So
Yeah, and in Green Lantern 94, 95, he was, that's where they at that era they were sort of splitting up. They didn't have Green Lantern and Green Arrow necessarily together in the whole book. They would each have their own sort of storyline, and then they would kind of combine the storylines at the end. And that's where John Stewart was trying to. He was basically taking Hal Jordan to the Guardians to, cure him of his illness.
all right, so I think you both have already said this, but Shad, favorite issue of these first five?
It's got to be 110.
Yeah, same here.
Mike?
Same here.
Oh, you know what? These are all. I'm sorry to rain on your childhood, but these are all pretty poor, pretty poor issues.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to just go with the origin story in '87 as being my favorite of the five, especially with regards to John Stewart, a John Stewart story.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, if you want to incorporate the reason, having John in the story, yeah, that's probably the only reason I'd say Tales of the Green Lantern Corps wasn't the best of the stories, even though it's not standalone either. But it's better written. But yeah, I get it. But you sometimes you like something not despite but because of the ridiculousness of it.
yes. All right.
And also, it's Christmas time.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
go.
Yeah.
That worked out. So, all right. So Shad, do you see much John Stewart in your comic reading future?
I don't know. I mean, there's been some things that you guys have brought up that makes me go like, oh, that would be an interesting thing. I mean, the War Journals series sounds interesting. The Mosaic sounds interesting. So, like, I think there's some stuff in there that I probably have been overlooking in the past that I might give a little bit more chance to when it comes to John Stewart, for sure.
Mike?
I mean, it's definitely in my future because I still have the Green Lantern War Journal to read. I've read one issue of it. I think it started out as a backup in the Green Lantern book, so I read some of those. But the actual standalone 12-issue series I haven't read yet. So when I'm done with that, though, I'm going to seek you out, Shad, and give them to you if you'd like to read it.
Absolutely.
But I will. I mean, he's a high enough in the pantheon of DC heroes. I think a guy like me that's going to read some DC superhero stuff, it's not really if and when, it's whether. It's more when than if is what it is.
Mm.
You know?
And that's probably the same for me. And this is my pat answer for this question is if I hear there's a good John Stewart story, I will 100% read it.
Yeah.
But I also do not see myself going back and reading these old John Stewart stories again because I think they're a product of their times, and I don't think a lot of them are very good. So
Yeah.
like the modern storytelling with this character is going to be something that's going to be a lot better than the prior storytelling.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
all right, final thoughts. What do you guys got? Anything to wrap up our discussion of John Stewart?
I think it covers it.
Yeah.
I knew I'd be talking ad nauseum about it, but it was fun. I loved these. I love this first five.
Okay, so let's do a little what we've been reading. So, I think we'll just round robin this, Mike, Shad, me, and until we're all done 3, 4, 5, whatever everybody feels like doing. So, Mike, why don't you go first?
Well, I want to preface it with I've been on this reading kick of 70s and 80s non-superhero, non-war, non-horror titles. I think I mentioned this maybe before. It started with Beowulf. You can blame Once and Future for I think that was the origin of me getting off on that tangent. So the ones I kind of picked out of some recent reading are going to be mostly the sci-fi stuff that I've read, and they're mostly miniseries. So the first one I'll talk about with you is The Conqueror of the Barren Earth from 1985. Have you heard of it?
Well, that's a Warlord spinoff.
It is. It started out as a backup strip in Warlord from like issue 63 to 88. Yeah. So it had its own 4-issue miniseries by Gary Cohn and Ron Randall, and I think that DC really wanted it to be more successful than it was, but it wasn't a very good story. It was pretty predictable. Good art. Ron Randall's a pretty solid artist. It's basically okay. So you got the Earth set. It's set thousands of years in the future, and the sun has become a red giant. So it's turned our planet into a desert mostly, and most of mankind took off for the stars. We went for other worlds, traveled the galaxy, and whoever was left on Earth was basically they turned into some tribes and savages fighting for control of the Earth. So I guess you'd say the main Earth people that left wanted to come back and take it over, reclaim Earth, and sent their best warrior, which was a female warrior named Janal de Komar, and she is, I mean, they kind of one of them deals where you get the title, you better live up to it. She's conqueror of the barren earth. So anyway, it's basically her and her team of soldiers try to fight against one of the rebel leaders, but she's captured, and she pretends to fall in love with that leader, and gets just to get close enough to defeat him, which she does. And yeah, so I think DC was hoping for a better reception because it even got an entry in Who's Who. And if you like sci-fi, it's worth a look, but otherwise look for them in the cheap bins or don't look at all. It's yeah.
All right, Shad.
I'm gonna start with. There's a little bit of a theme to what I've been reading. I found on accident. But I'm gonna start with Absolute Wonder Woman issue 1. We talked a little bit about Absolute Batman, I think, last week or so. I'm caught up on Absolute Batman. I read the first issue of Absolute Superman, which I was not a big fan of at all whatsoever. But Absolute Wonder Woman really captured my attention. And to just kind of give the synopsis or the what makes this the absolute Wonder Woman. This is issue 1's very much the origin story to kind of set everything up. But in this story, Zeus ends up taking Diana as a baby from the Amazons and gives her to Circe in Hell to raise Diana instead of her being raised by the Amazons or the Amazonians. In Themyscira, yep. And so in that, Diana learns different spells, and Circe kind of becomes her mother figure. She learns how to fight off demons, how to befriend demons. So it's just this little bit of a very much a darker take on Diana, on Wonder Woman. Written by Kelly Thompson, drawn by Hayden Sherman, and there wasn't a lot of overall narrative to this first issue as much as it was a setup to what is going to be in the future of it. But I immediately truthfully, I don't read a lot of superhero stuff anymore, and of course just this Absolute stuff was like, I want to see what's going on with it. And I was definitely leaving Superman. I would take or leave Batman, but Wonder Woman, and I've never been a Wonder Woman reader, was like, all right, I love this Wonder Woman from Hell kind of vibe that we're getting. And how much, I mean, I feel like Wonder Woman's always been a little bit of a rebel, but she's definitely this like sin against the gods kind of thing, and something almost an abomination, and has to kind of prove her worth in a totally different way. And this kind of being an origin story to it all is I'm definitely in on and would recommend to anyone.
I concur. I read it too.
Oh.
Did you? Okay, awesome, cool. Yeah, it's very much like Vertigo Wonder Woman almost.
So my first one is a 2021 book called The Six Sidekicks of Trigger Keaton, issue number 1. This is written by Kyle Starks with art by Chris Schweitzer. It's the basic premise of the book is, and I've only read the first issue because that's the only one that I have, and I have a specific reason why I own this issue. But it's basically this story about this action star named Trigger Keaton, who is found. Looks like it's a suicide. He hung himself in his his actor's room while he's on set. But what it boils down to is he's actually been murdered. So he has these 6 former sidekicks who are teaming up basically to try to solve the murder of Trigger Keaton. And what's interesting about one of the sidekicks, so this is written by Kyle Starks. He's from Evansville, Indiana. And for a while he worked at a comic shop with another guy I know from Evansville named Ted Haycraft. Well, one of the sidekicks in this book is named Tad Haycroft. So it's his kind of parody of this other guy that I know here inside of this book. So it's just kind of humorous to see this caricature of this guy I know as one of the characters in this story, 6 Sidekicks of Trigger Keaton. It's pretty good. It's comical. It's got a little bit of you have all these. It's like the main character is kind of like a Chuck Norris martial artist, Western action guy. So he has all these various sidekicks that are in kind of the TV shows, and of course, most of the time the sidekick is a little underappreciated. So they have less than positive, thoughts on Trigger Keaton, but they are going to work together to try to solve his murder. So at some point, I do need to pick up the balance of this series, but I also have it signed by Kyle Starks and Ted Haycraft, also known as Tad Haycroft, in this particular issue. So,
Well, I have the trade because it was recommended to me for one of the Roadshow episodes. So if you want to team up with me on that one,
I absolutely would team
Okay.
up with you on that. That would force me to finish that story because I need to do that.
all right, I'll lock that in.
Let's lock it in.
All right.
All right, back to you, Mike.
Okay, continuing the trend of 1980s science fiction, here's one that will... Did you guys like Stranger Things?
Oh yeah.
It was okay.
The TV show? Okay, well, that's a good... That had good 80s tropes and things. Slash Maraud is it was basically, it's a 6-issue miniseries from 1987 and 1988 by Doug Munch and Paul Galassi, which Galassi's got great art. It was a mature reader's book, but it's the story's about a post-apocalyptic United States where humans are totally subjugated by aliens who use them for twisted genetic experiments. It's gritty, but it's also hokey, and I think you're going to either love it or hate it based on how much you like those 80s tropes, especially late 80s, like the mullets, and the parachute pants, and the dialogue is so 80s. It's basically if you mixed Mad Max with some kind of punk style or punk rockers, and that's what Slash Maraud is. Slash is the actual main character, the protagonist. So it's got mutant dinosaurs and roving biker gangs, and people might like some of that, but it really wasn't for me. Basically, he's kind of like Conquer the Barren Earth. He assembles his team, and they're trying to win back the Earth from the aliens. But I had a hard time really enjoying the series, despite any kind of nostalgia or reminiscence from that era. So yeah, it's kind of middle of the road, probably on the low side.
There was a fairly recent, like the last 4 or 5 years, where they made this parody action movie of like 80s movies, and I'm blanking on the name.
I know what you're talking about.
Maybe I'll find it while Shad's talking about his second book.
My second book was a sequel to a video game, and I remember maybe we talked about this when it was actually being solicited, but it's called Immortals Phoenix Rising was the name of the video game, and this is of the same name, but from Great Beginnings. So this is a sequel to the video game, which the video game follows a character named Phoenix who sets out on the world to fight Typhon, who is tearing up the world, and through her journey she interacts with all these Greek gods, and spoilers, at the end of the video game finds out that she herself is a god and the daughter of Zeus. And so the sequel story, the artwork is very similar to the video game. The way it's written is very similar to the game, which is kind of a comical take on the Greek mythology with a little bit of tongue. It almost reminds me of, it's a little bit more elevated than like Lego video game humor, but kind of in that same kind of goofiness to it. But she ends up returning home to her mother, and who she thought was her biological father all these years, but obviously after she finds out Zeus is her dad, knows that there's something afoot. So this whole story is about lineage. It's about your parents learning about your kind of past and your family's past. And even though she's been given this gift, I guess, of being a god, being grounded in that, because she kind of starts off where the video game left off, which is very much like, I'm a god now and I live on Mount Olympus and all this, and just kind of really staying true to yourself, even with the fame and fortune that comes with that. So I thought it was a neat little kind of tag to the video game itself. And if you were a fan of that game, would definitely recommend reading this book.
Cool.
Well, since Mike mentioned the Netflix series Stranger Things, I'm going to mention the Netflix series Black Mirror.
Oh.
So this nice gentleman that I know gave me their one shot of a book called Death Ratioed, written by Mark Russell. And it is, the concept is very Black Mirror-ish. This guy wakes up from a coma to discover that society has really, really changed, and now you get a caller, and people give you thumbs up or thumbs down based on their interactions with you. And if you get too many thumbs down, then the caller causes your head to explode. So it's very reminiscent of a Black Mirror episode where your social status and whether or not you could go to work was based on your likes. So that you have, was it Bryce Dallas Howard? I can't remember how. It's Ron Howard's daughter.
Yeah, that's her name.
But she's the actress in that particular episode. She just has a bad day, and all of a sudden she's getting all these thumbs down, and she can't go to work. Everybody's kind of turning their back on her. Well, it's kind of like this same thing, except for in this one they add in there's this almost like a rebel group that's rebelling against or living outside of the society where you have these callers. They are disabled and such. So it is kind of interesting. The one thing that was like really disturbing in this one is the idea that whenever you get down where you only have one dislike and you're gonna die, it's like your caller starts beeping at you. So it's like there's a subgroup of people who, when they hear people beeping, they'll just automatically dislike them just because they want to see their head explode.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
So, but it was pretty good. Again, it kind of leans into that whole Black Mirror. So if you're a fan of Black Mirror, then I would definitely recommend Death Ratioed. And thank you very much to the gentleman who gave me this copy so I could read it.
What a guy. So
What a guy.
Is that Mark Russell written, right?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Back to you, Mike.
Okay, well, now I'll talk about something I really liked from the 1980s, and it was also science fiction. Spanner's Galaxy. Do you remember that?
Yes, that was in a video game as well.
Was it? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this was a 6-issue miniseries, and
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Star Raiders, not so.
Oh, right,
disregard
yeah, I know about that
I
too,
made
yeah.
a mistake. Yeah, I'm mistake there. Sorry.
Okay. Nick Cudi was the writer, and Tom Mandrake was the artist. Now, so this is it's science fiction. The series follows the adventures of a young, inexperienced Earth guy named Polaris Spanner, and his attempts to evade the government of Earth because he got wrongly accused of something. So the way he evades capture is he has this teleportation device. Forget the name of it, but he can go anywhere across the galaxy with the caveat that he can only teleport if there is someone with another device like that wants to exchange places with him. So you have to like put yourself in a queue saying, you know what, I need, and so apparently there is a backlog of people that are willing to swap because he's never been like stopped from swapping, but it makes things kind of unpredictable and the adventures he's in. He's always being chased. It's a fun book. It's a fun read. The art is hit or miss though, because Tom Mandrake was just getting started as an artist. I believe it wasn't his best work. I really enjoyed his later work with Martian Manhunter and The Spectre and some other stuff. But of the three I've talked about, this is the one I would recommend if you can pick it up cheaply, especially because they pretty much anything like this is going to be cheap. But it was a fun read. And I also was getting these reads because you can't get them on the app. So I had to, I was trying to find.
They're licensed. Is that one licensed?
I don't think so. I just don't think they were that popular for them to be on the app. Yeah.
Because I may not. And actually, I think it's Atari Force that I'm thinking.
Atari Force, yeah, that definitely is. Yeah. I've got a couple of those issues, but I'd have to buy the physical.
I've had that whole series multiple times, but I've never read it or kept it. I've always just sold it as a set.
It's got Jose Luis Garcia Lopez art, so that's a plus.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Shad?
All right. I accidentally had a theme, just like Atch had a theme of things, which mine were all Greek god related for some reason. I don't know why. But my next one was the Disney's Hercules series from Dynamite. I kept up on that, and this was it was 6 issues. And it followed Hercules post everything we know from the Disney movie and everything. And the only thing that I really have disliked about the Hercules comics and the Hades one and all of that, which is enough for me to really just trash the whole series, but I do like this one. But is when they did the Hercules animated series cartoon. Icarus was one of the kids that he grew up with and went to school with and everything. And Icarus was obviously, if you know the mythology, flew too close to the sun, all that good stuff. And so he was like this kind of fried high school kid. It definitely he was comical. He was the very much the comic relief of that series. And when they did I think it was specifically the Hades series that they did a totally different version of Icarus that was not the burnt out high school kid, and it was very frustrating because that was my favorite part of that. But I digress on that. This series kind of followed specifically Hercules and his gang as they start finding out that different Greek gods are going missing, and they think that Hades is behind the whole thing, and Hades hasn't been seen since the end of the Hercules movie, blah, blah, blah. And after they all start going missing, they make their way to the underworld to discover that Hades is not behind the disappearances, but it's the Sphinx, who in this story, and I don't think that this lines up with actual Greek mythology, the Sphinx was a Greek god that was banished to Egypt by the gods and was never to cross the river, but has returned to exact their revenge on all of the gods. So Hercules has to fight the Sphinx, blah, blah, blah. Hercules doesn't do well on it and is left for dead at the end of this series and is promised to continue soon, but issue 7 has not been solicited yet, and it's been months since this ended. So I don't know if we're ever going to find out if Hercules lives or dies after his run-in with the Sphinx.
Well, that stinks.
Well, Shad, I'm going to lightly lean into your Greek mythology here, but with a Western twist to it,
all right.
and talk about Ain't No Grave. So that fine gentleman who gave me the death ratioed one shot also provided me with the complete 5-issue series of Ain't No Grave by Scotty Young and Jorge Corona. And I talked about the first issue of this series, but it was nice to kind of read the whole series. It is excellent. I love it. I highly recommend it. But the general premise is there's a woman who's had a checkered past as an outlaw. She settles down, but she's dying. So to get more time, she decides that she's going to go kill death. So she does things like crosses the river Styx. The boat is a riverboat, gambling boat, instead of just a just like the regular kind of mythological boat that you see. So it has a lot of that Greek influence in it. The one thing that you always talk about stories where they always have to have a happy ending and blah blah blah. It's like this story just did not end like I wanted it to end, but it is still really really good, and it is changing my mind about Scotty Young because I have generally not been a fan of some of the stuff that he has written, but this is so good. So absolutely, if you can get your hands on the 5-issue series, Ain't No Grave, it is a definite read and a definite. Hopefully, you'll enjoy it as much as I did. So
I would
it's
recommend
really
if you like that and you like everything about that, the Me You Love in the Dark is also the same team. It's Scotty with I lost his name. You just said it and it just went
Jose Corona.
Yeah, it's him and that's just like a 5-issue series as well. And then they also did Middle West together, and that is fantastic as well. And Middle West is almost.
I read the first issue.
You've read first issue of Middle West?
The first issue of Middle West, and it didn't grab me,
Okay.
but yeah. But I'll definitely give it. Maybe I need to give it another shot.
Yeah.
Back to you, Mike.
Well, I've got two more I could talk about, but it depends on how much time we have. I can just do one.
I got one more.
I've got two more I would like to talk about. So.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'll keep up the theme. We're going to go back to the 70s, though. This is Starfire and not Coriander, not the Teen Titan. There was a short-lived series. It was meant to be ongoing, but it didn't make it past 8 issues from 1976 to 1977. It was by David Michelinie, but David Michelinie only wrote the first 2 issues before he bailed. So after he left, Elliot Magan, Elliot as in S with an exclamation.
Exclamation point, Magan.
Yeah, right. He did 3 through 5, and then Steve Englehart did 6 through 7, and Tom DeFalco did 8. So, yeah, 4 different writers on an 8-issue series. The artist stayed the same, Mike Vosberg, and it was good art. So I remember seeing this. I don't know that when I got it, but I remember having the first issue for a long time, and I remember the character's design was pretty striking. It was sort of an exotic-looking woman warrior, and carrying her sword and kind of a cool outfit and stuff. But anyway, I've had only read. I don't think I'd read even the first issue. I ended up going ahead and collecting all 8 issues over the years, so I read it, and it's basically the story of it's set on a nameless planet where humans are all enslaved by an alien race. Now, this planet could possibly be a future Earth because you don't really know, but it's a continuity that's shared with Claw the Unconquered and the Star Hunters. Also, were 2 properties that were created by Michelinie. So Starfire was orphaned as a child. She was captured and raised by the chief of this alien race called the Mygorgs. And he intended to make her his bride whenever she came of age, whether she was really willing or not. And she escaped when she learned of the wedding plans, and she met a guy named Dagon who looked like a sort of like a cross between a pilgrim with a strange hat and I don't know, it just looked like a pilgrim almost. Mm-hmm. But he trained her in all kinds of combat and weapons, and they became lovers for a short time before he was killed by the Mygorg race. And that really spurred Starfire into action. She recruited a bunch of humans that she had broke out of prison to take the planet back. So all of what I just described is basically the first issue. The rest of the series is just a sequence of her adventures and fighting random threats each issue. So it's an intriguing, there are a few Starfires in DC Comics. You got, like I said, the one that it was a Teen Titan. You got the one that used to be, he was a Russian hero / villain that ended up being called Red Star. And then you got this Starfire. And anyway, I just always liked the overall design and the look. You could tell that they were going for the long form, but they pulled the plug after, like many of these series in the mid 70s. They had a kind of a nice cult following, but they didn't have enough people buying the book. I think even with the different writers, though, the writing was consistent, and I can only attribute that to Joe Orlando as the editor throughout. So yeah, it's now she's made a couple of appearances in DC books over the years, or at least mentions, like in Swamp Thing and Time Masters, some New 52 book put out about the Time Masters. So yeah, this one I enjoyed as well, and I'd like to see her as a character in something else eventually.
Shad?
My last book is because I didn't read any more than this is is a book that I was surprised by. There's an interesting origin story to how it came into my possession. I was on a work trip with my boss and his wife, and we were talking about comics and graphic novels and everything. And she said, "Well, I've been reading this book that I'd gotten from the library called Here," and she showed me it, and I was like, "I have this book in my to read list, and I don't even remember why or where it came from." So there's this book called Here, written and drawn by Richard McGuire. And I can only assume that this was on some short list of books that was nominated for awards or was potentially nominated, or of some sort of high regard, in that it had some inventive storytelling to it. And it came out in 2014, but was originally a 6-page short story that came out in '89. And then was expanded into this graphic novel. And it is really kind of a simple book, but is really neat in the way that the storytelling is. It takes place in this single area. This corner of this room is kind of how it starts. And you just see the illustration of the corner of this room, and it has a year tagged on it, 1977 or whatever it may be. And as you flip the pages, different sections of this room are squared off, framed off, I guess you could say, and it has a different year and a different. You may see a person walking through it, and you may see grass in a certain spot, and it takes you every spanning from billions of years from like I think the furthest back was like 3 billion BC to 23,000 something or other into the future. And it just grabs different pieces of time or different themes, and it may be Halloween throughout the different ages, and you'll see a kid dressed up in the 70s in one little frame in the corner of the room, and then you'll see a couple at a party that's a Halloween party in that same house 20 years later. And so it really, and you get some sequence where you get like 3 or 4 pages of some dialogue back and forth, but dialogue's very limited. And it's just this really cool use of the medium of comics to tell not really this giant story that is of much meaning, but just of how time and space continues to do so over billions of years. And it's just really pretty. And it's just this kind of like, oh, this, I understand. I still don't know how I had this on my list, and it came into my life again just a couple of weeks ago. But I was just like, oh, yeah, this is so cool to see these snapshots that are almost laid out as photos, laid on top of photos and overlapping, and just seeing how you can use comics in all kinds of different ways. And as I was kind of looking for the years and everything to kind of have a little history on the book, I found out that there was a movie that came out earlier this year based on it.
I was going to say, I've watched this.
Have you?
You started describing this, and I just pulled it up. Yeah, we went to see this movie.
Did you really? Yeah. Yeah. It's got Tom Hanks and Robin Wright and Paul Bettany and all kinds of people in it. Yeah.
Yep. It's got Beth from Yellowstone.
Okay.
You described it to a T. They did, from what you just described the comic to be, their film adaptation did it justice.
Really? That's awesome.
At first, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? What is going on? And by the end, it was very emotional, and it was good. And I had no idea, though, that it was based on a comic.
Cool. Awesome.
Wow. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so my next book is The Tin Can Society. This is going to be a 9-issue series written by Peter Warren, art by Francesco Mobili. I'm sure I'm butchering that name. This book I'm going to mention does have a content/trigger warning because it does depict graphic depictions of violence and bodily harm, including some experienced by disabled and BIPOC characters. Discussions of racism, ableism, and hate are prevalent throughout this story. And this is honestly, if I had looked a little bit more closely at this book when you saw it in previews, I would not have ordered this because I am not a Rick Remender fan. And come to find out that the series, The Tin Can Society, is created by Peter Warren, Rick Remender, and Francesco Mobili. So I probably would have skipped it. I'm glad I didn't. I think Peter Warren does the majority of the duty writing because there's not actually a credit to Rick Remender other than a story credit. Peter Warren is the writer credit, but it follows this incident where a superhero is killed, very graphically shown with broken legs and a smashed skull. It turns out that this was a disabled individual, and we kind of go back into his past where he moves into a new school, finally gets a group of friends, and they form the Tin Can Society. He had spina bifida, so when he was born, his parents gave him up for adoption. He was adopted by some Christian scientists, and the thing they say, which means they didn't much believe in science or medicine. So he had this tin can that he kept hidden that had all of these things that he was not allowed to have. So he shared it with his friends, so they became known as the Tin Can Society. Well, he is apparently a super genius, think Tony Stark, but disabled. And he kind of builds his own suit eventually, but there's almost no focus in the story on the hero because he's dead in the first panel. But the story is going to focus on are the still living members of the Tin Can Society, who one of the individuals is convinced that somebody in the Tin Can Society is who was responsible for killing the main character, or not really the main character, but the John Moore, who is the hero, the disabled hero character in this story. So it's a very solid first issue. So I'm glad I missed the Rick Remender mention in the in the previews catalog. So I'm glad I have it. I am going to try to read the balance of this series. I'll probably wait for it to come out in trade or maybe hit Comixology, hopefully. I know a lot of the Image stuff will end up there on Comixology, but I'm going to, mark it down to return to at some point in the future.
Cool. Okay, my last one. So I'm deviating from the theme because I didn't know
Not
how.
going to allow it. Can't stay on theme. No.
Well, I can. I'll have to wing it though if I do that. So, have you guys read Justice League Unlimited yet? The first issue?
No.
No.
Do you plan on reading it?
No.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and spoil it. Okay, so as you probably know, I've been anxiously awaiting a new Justice League comic. It's been way longer than it needed to be. But I wasn't expecting this unlimited direction, and although the idea I think worked just fine for the animated series, I think we're going to see just how sustainable this type of league is in the long run. Because, and I just thought the best way for me to weigh my thoughts on this was to do pros and cons about it. So, the pros. The Watchtower. For me, always and forever, a satellite Justice League is top notch with me. This might be the closest I ever get again. um, I like seeing so many heroes and villains, even the D-list ones. I imagine there's probably some method to their madness to keep copyrights going, by pulling them in, just like Who's Who did back in the 80s. I really like the specialized missions of different heroes based on what the mission was. So, I'm sorry, I'm kind of mixing two of the points. The specialized jobs, I should say. So you got the challengers of the unknown. I don't know if you call them maintenance or troubleshooters or what. They have a specialized work that they got to do. You got the question is the head of security. You got Black Lightning is sort of the recruiter slash trainer. So I like things like that. The assignment of heroes by mission. So, for instance, there's a scene where the loudspeaker goes off and it announces the deployment of Aquaman, Sand, and Tuatara. So they're being deployed to Auckland, New Zealand to fight the Marine Marauder. So you got Aquaman, Marine Marauder, you got Tuatara, who's from New Zealand. Sand, I don't know what role he plays, but it's form-fitted assignments to the mission. These missions are done by Red Tornado. He's kind of like the AI dispatcher because he doesn't have a body right now because it was destroyed in the Absolute Power event. Do you remember the War Wheel from the Black Hawk comics? Do you remember any covers that was just a giant wheel that had a lot of guns? Well, they brought the War Wheel and leave it to Mark Wade to do that. So that was pretty cool. And then speaking of Wade, you got Wade Mora. That's a plus. Wade's like an encyclopedia of DC characters. He knows how to put the right characters for the right stories. And I can't think of anybody on this side of George Perez that is better than Dan Mora for these large groups or large group scenes. So those are a lot of pluses. The cons, it's more of me just having an anticipation and concern. I think if it's possible, it's too inclusive. So I'm not a big fan of including the anti-heroes. I know there were none in this story except I guess you could say a reformed Star Sapphire, but she's kind of gone back and forth over the years between hero and villain. But the promotions I've seen have also shown like Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, people like that. So I'm not, I'm more of a true blue. You got to earn the role or earn the position in the Justice League. Having everybody on this watchtower seems to be a risk. It's a liability. If a bad guy decided to blow up the satellite, well, you got pretty much all of the Earth's population of heroes. Mm-hmm. And I think it also, another con is that it's diluting the significance of the other supergroups because you still got the Titans and the JSA and the Outsiders or whoever. And they may have their own headquarters on Earth, but they've got like sub headquarters on the Watchtower. And I don't know how I feel about that. But my biggest concern is that if it's so many heroes always going out into action, there's not much room for interpersonal relationships and the development of them. So to me, that's so important in a team book is just the human side of their interactions. So, all in all, the jury's still out. I think I had more pros than cons. So, in the long run, I'm saying yes, pick this book up, especially if you're a Justice League fan. But it's got some challenges.
All right, Shad, you said you were done?
Yep, I'm all done on my end.
All right, well, then I'll just do one more as well. Now, this is a book that I picked up because I thought it was going to be like a parody or kind of a humorous story, but this is from Mad Cave Comics, and it is The Kosher Mafia. I don't know that it says how long the series is going to run. I'm going to assume that it's going to be a 5 or 6 issue series. So with a name like Kosher Mafia, I thought it was going to be a little bit humorous and kind of like instead of Italian mobsters, you're going to have Jewish mobsters and that whole type of, kind of funny. Mm-hmm. This is nothing like what I was expecting. So it is basically set in 1936. So it's that lead up to the to World War II and the persecution of the Jews during World War II, and it even talks about what's going on in Germany. But you have this Jewish individual who is the accountant for basically the mob, all right, and he is told that he can retire and he will receive a severance. Well, it turns out that what they meant was that they were going to send somebody to kill him. So you have this hitman named Mr. Gold who basically shows up at, Berkowitz is the accountant's name, who is there to kill him. Well, he actually, through some flashback scenes, you kind of find out that Mr. Gold has a little bit of sympathy for Mr. Berkowitz, and ultimately he decides that he's not going to kill him. He's gonna have to fake his death, but then they are going to start working to protect the Jewish community in the United States, so that what is happening in Germany does not happen to them here in the U.S. So this is written by David Hazan. Artist is Sammy Cavella. I'm not familiar with either of these creators.
You just forgot. David Hazan wrote he's Australian.
Nottingham.
And he wrote Nottingham. Yes, thank you, Shad. Yes.
Okay. So I have read at least one thing by him. So this is a very solid story, though it is very, very serious. Not this lighthearted parody thing that I was expecting. But I am glad that I picked it up, and as was the case with Tin Can Society, when this is available in some type of trade format, I plan to finish this series. So again, that's Kosher Mafia from Mad Cave.
So a pleasant surprise.
Yes, a pleasant surprise. I had several pleasant surprises in my reading as well. So okay, trivia.
Ready for some trivia?
We're at about an hour and 35. So I think we got time.
Okay. All right. We'll dive right into it. I've got it queued up.
All right.
All right. Question 1. Name 3 of the original 6 members of the Infinity Watch team.
Okay. So we should have Gamora, Adam Warlock, Pip the Troll, Drax the Destroyer. I'm trying to think of who the other 2 would have been, but are you okay with the answer of Adam Warlock, Pip the Troll, and Gamora, Mike?
My only hope was that he was going to say the Infinity Inc. Yeah.
That's what I thought he was going to say. It's like, oh man, I'm doomed on this one. All right. So, Shad, that's what we're going to go with.
You've got so you got 3 of them. So you got it right completely. The ones that you were missing were Thanos, and Moondragon. Okay.
Yeah. I forgot that Thanos was actually part of that, and I might have remembered Moondragon eventually.
But yes, we got that one right. That is a win for Team Campus Comics.
All right, good deal.
All right.
One for one, Scott.
That's right. Woo! Question 2. Where was Dr. Michael Morbius born and raised?
Oh, gosh. Oh, I don't know.
We're just looking for a country.
A country. So with a name like Morbius.
It sounds Latin.
So
like
he's the living vampire. He's the living vampire. And of course, it's Amazing Spider-Man 101 is his first appearance. And I can tell you all those things.
I wish we'd get credit for those little extra tidbits.
Yeah, for those little tidbits. I can't even go to my case over here and pull it out because I think it's a graded copy, so I'd have to break the seal on it.
Doesn't seem like it's that.
The internet would be easier, but that would be cheating.
Yeah, that would be cheating. Man, I, so I want to just say New York, but since
But it's a
Chad did
country,
say
not a
country,
city. Yeah.
so I can't imagine that they lean too heavily into the whole Transylvania thing and put him from Transylvania. Everything I say is going to be a guess.
Okay.
So Mike, do you have something that you want to go with a guess on?
It reminds me of Marius from the Anne Rice vampire novels,
Okay.
and that was sort of he was from the Roman times, so I would have said Italy, but only because of the name.
And that I'm thought crossed my mind as well. So let's just go with that. Let's just go with Italy.
You would have been really close, but across the water from it, it's Greece.
Greece. Dang it!
Greece.
Ah,
Okay.
that would have been my second guess. Yeah.
See, my second guess would have been Transylvania. So
Across
just
the
lean into the whole Dracula thing.
Just across the sea, no big deal.
I didn't realize he was Greek.
Yeah.
So.
Oh man.
All right, question
Okay.
3. What is the name of the alternate reality world in the comic The Max?
Oh my gosh.
Never read it. Never even had an inclination to read it. That was some of that 90s stuff.
Mm-hmm. I've not read it either, but I have heard this. Oh! Oh gosh, it's like the back country, or it's the. It's something to do with Australia.
Yeah, you're
Like the Outback?
ding ding
The
ding ding ding
no,
ding ding
is
ding
it the
ding.
Okay, there you
Oh,
go.
we
All
get it
right.
for just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I don't know. That was. I'm surprised. Okay, thank you, Mike, for coming up with the Outback.
The Outback.
You
Yeah.
led me to it.
I knew. It took a second, but we got there.
All right, question 4. Captain Marvel / Shazam first appeared in Whiz Comics #2 in 1940. Which publisher produced Whiz Comics?
Fawcett Comics.
That is correct.
And who appeared in Whiz Comics #1?
I don't know. That wasn't on my sheet.
The Wizard.
Nope, that's a trick question. There was no Whiz Comics #1.
Was comics number one.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the
Really?
story behind that?
They did an ash can, I believe, but there was no #1.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting. Huh. All right, number 5. Which version of Earth is the primary one in most Marvel continuity?
That's this one, Mike.
Yeah, 616.
There you go.
That's correct. All right. Moving on to number 6. You guys are 4 for 5, so that's
Although I don't know why. Is that the area code of New York?
Area code in New York.
Yeah.
what I
okay.
thought, yeah.
That's right.
All right. The Unipower or Unipower, I'm not sure which is correct. The Unipower.
I would say Unipower.
Okay, Unipower, which is believed to be connected to the Microverse, is an extra-dimensional force that possesses an individual
Captain Universe.
in a time of crisis and transforms that individual into who?
So that would be Captain Universe.
That was a
First appearance
long
in
question.
Micronaut issue number 8.
That's correct. That was a maybe.
Sorry to
get-
jump the gun on that one, Mike.
These are long questions this time. Very detailed.
But I didn't hear the answer. So Captain Universe was a member of the Micronauts, right?
No. So
Oh.
Captain Universe is a embodiment of the Universal Force, and he
Okay.
takes on. He basically takes over somebody in certain times of need.
Okay.
So you have Captain Universe.
Okay.
There was some Steve Ditko issues with Captain Universe in it, like Marvel's Spotlights, but actually, first appearance was in Micronauts.
Okay. Cool.
All right, question number 7. Which character appeared on the Marvel value stamp in the Incredible Hulk 181? That seems
What?
very specific.
That is okay. I realize that even though we only have like 2 people listening to this, I probably shouldn't be like giving the answers before you finish reading the questions. That way, if they want to pause it, they could,
Yeah, right.
play along.
I guess
much
so.
fun
Yeah,
playing
yeah,
along.
you're right.
So I've got to remind me to stop doing that, like I did on the last question. Okay, I think it's Cyclops.
Okay. Final
You okay
answer.
with that, Mike?
What year did that come out? 181.
Well, that would have been the 70s. So,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go with Cyclops.
All right, that's wrong, but I'm gonna mess up this pronunciation. I think it's Shauna the She-Devil, or Shanna.
Okay.
Shayna the She-Devil? Yeah, that's
Shauna.
Kazar's
It's
girlfriend.
Shauna. Yeah. Shauna the She-Devil.
How do you know?
Yeah.
Have you met her?
Yes.
Has she ever said her
Twice.
name out loud?
Twice.
Because I've been saying Shayna all this time.
Well, it's Shanna.
Oh, yeah, so phonetically it would be Shanna or Shauna.
Right.
Shanna.
Shauna.
Well,
I always said Shauna.
did you know
but-
Kazar and Quasar were brothers? I just made it up.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, the final question, and maybe the easiest one in the book. I'm not sure. What does the abbreviation DC in DC Comics stand for?
That's all you, Mike.
Detective Comics.
It's the Detective Comics comics. You are correct. The
It's not
silliest
the
of
distinguished
names.
competition.
Right.
Yes, yeah. It wasn't always called that, but
Yeah.
But they recently
So
moved
we're
back to the Bullet.
Yeah. 6 for 8. We were 6 for 8 that time?
You were 6 for 8. Yep.
Okay. All right. Not too bad.
Not too bad at all. No.
So, all right. So let's do who's got their phone out ready to go on a shake?
Oh yeah. Let me find. I
Let
gotta
Chad
find my
go.
phone.
Okay. I got mine. I'll start here. Oh, big surprise.
Micronauts.
It's ROM.
Oh, ROM.
Of course. No, it's ROM this time. Actually, though it is a surprise because it is from IDW instead of from Marvel.
yeah.
So this is ROM issue 4. This has what's cool about this one, and the reason why it's still in my collection, is that it has a variant cover by Al Milgrom, who was one of the key creators on the original ROM series, and it kind of like is a little bit of an homage. I don't know if I can blow that up any at all, or you can maybe make it visible. But there's some Kirby, like I know Kirby has like an Iron Man where he kind of has this similar pose. So it's really kind of like Al Milgrom homaging Jack Kirby here on this cover for the IDW series for ROM. So it wasn't a great story, but it's ROM, so I kept it in my collection.
All right. I'll give a shake next. I went to show you on the camera, even though the camera's turned off. Marvel Voices Spider-Man. I bought this because I really was into the Marvel Voices series for a little bit, and I love some anthology. Finding new artists, new writers. I have not read this, but it's evidently the first appearance of Recluse, the Zion Riley Recluse, and first appearance of Spider-Friend. I don't know if that means anything important at all anymore, but though that's a key issue for that reason.
Okay. Ooh, let's see. Justice League of America, Volume 1, Issue 11.
Ooh.
Yeah, so this features, looks like one of the demons from, oh gosh, one of the 3 demons, but I don't know if it is or not. I'll say having captured Felix Faust, the League attempted to capture the Lord of Time, who taunts them from before vanishing into the future. And Superman takes everybody into the future where they apprehend the Lord of Time, but when trying to return him, they find their way blocked. And it's the Demons 3, and I always Wrath, Ghast, and Abigdigno or something like that. I can never pronounce that last one's name. So that's one of the ones on the covers. One of the demons is on the cover here. So this was an early Justice League of Justice League of America from 1962. Gardner Fox and Mike Sikowski and Murphy Anderson doing the inks. So yeah, it featured in this issue Green Arrow, Martian Manhunter, Flash, Aquaman, and of course one of the demons, Abnegazar. Yeah, it wasn't that hard. I made it harder than what it was.
All right. So, Shad, what do we have coming up on episode 200
All
from the
right.
Campus Comics Cast?
Yes, for our milestone episode 200, we're going to do something we haven't done before, which is a trivia extravaganza. It's going to be all trivia the whole episode, plus who knows what else will come up, but mostly trivia.
All right. And Mike, if somebody wanted to reach out to you besides podcasts at bergcomics.com, how might they do that?
Well, they can email me at mike@comicshoproadshow.com, or they can hit me up on the Campus Comics Cast Facebook page. They can comment there, or they can comment or send a message on Blue Sky, which I have an account under Mike's Comic Shop Roadshow.
Shad, what about you?
You can find me at shadschubert.com. That's SHAADSCHUBERT, with links to all my stuff. And you can probably find me playing at a farmer's market near you, unless near you is not in Southern Illinois. And then in that case, probably not.
And I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at bergcomics.com, BURGcomics.com, which has links to my social media pages and eBay store. And we'll be back with some trivia in episode 2.
Not in Southern Illinois.